couple of weekends ago I was playing through the third and final Title Update 15 PTS. I missed the second one, so I was wanting to see some of the changes that had been implemented for the Countdown game mode, but also wanted to try out some of the new gear. The devs had announced that there were some issues with some of the pieces that were causing some disconnects and deltas, so these have been removed. But given that I was having nothing but delta issues, unable to even finish a single Countdown session, I thought I'd have a bit of a muck around with them anyway. I've seen the hundreds of videos coming out about the PTS builds, weapons, and every small change and tweak coming from the developers, so don't worry, this won't just be another one of those. This video will be a little bit different. I'm actually not quite sure what to make of it, to be honest, and I'm hoping you may be able to help. Some of you may remember seeing a video I put out a while ago called Named and Exotic Items Story/Lore. This was a summary of a number of items available in-game that had a bit of background and story that most people would overlook when playing through. For example, the White Death named marksman rifle pays homage to Simu Hayaha, a Finnish military sniper in the Winter War, who is believed to have killed over 500 men. He went on to live up until the ripe old age of 96, despite having half his face blown off by a Red Army explosive round. I'll chuck that video in the top right corner if you wanted to check it out. So this will be a video similar to that, where I will go over the lore of some of the new weapons and gear being introduced in Title Update 15. Much like the existing named and exotic items, I haven't found everything or figured out what they mean, and some don't have anything at all. But for now, we'll be covering the Catharsis exotic mask, Kingbreaker named assault rifle, and Deer named LMG. The Catharsis is a new exotic mask being introduced in Title Update 15. The talent, Vicious Cycle, looks like an interesting one that I can see myself trying out on a tank build to provide extra team support. But this isn't what I'm interested in here. If we look to the top, there is a quote that reads, "The establishment does everything in its power to ensure that the revolutionary rage is redirected into empty outlets, which provide pressure releases for desires that could become dangerous if allowed to progress." Going back to the talent, there is a direct relation here, where if I sum it up in its most simple form, the more damage you take, the more stacks and power you obtain. When a limit is reached, a cloud of healing is released, purging all status effects, restoring armor to you and those around you. This quote actually originates from a book written by George L. Jackson called Blood in My Eye. Jackson was an American activist of unbridled oppression and racism. Even while behind bars, he was involved in revolutionary activity, taking a stand at a time where the system was doing all that it could to break his spirit. Blood in My Eye ties together a collection of Jackson's letters and essays in which he presents his analysis of armed struggle, class war, fascism, communism, and a wide range of other topics. It was completed only days before Jackson was killed by prison guards in 1971 during an alleged escape attempt. The quote used on the Catharsis is only a snippet of a much larger quote. Fascism has established itself in a most disguised and efficient manner in this country. It feels so secure that the leaders allow us the luxury of a faint protest. Take the protest too far, however, and they will show their other face. Doors will be kicked down in the night, and machine gun fire and buckshot will become the medium of exchange. The establishment does everything in its power to ensure that revolutionary rage is redirected into empty outlets, which provide pressure releases for desires that could become dangerous if allowed to progress. One has to understand that the fascist arrangement tolerates the existence of no valid revolutionary activity. It is programmed into its very nature, a massive, complex and automatic defense mechanism for all of our old methods for raising the consciousness of a potentially revolutionary class of people. The essence of a USA totalitarian social-political capitalism is concealed behind the illusion of a mass participatory society. We must rip away its mask, then the debate can end, and we can enter a new phase of struggle based on the development of an armed revolutionary culture that will triumph. This certainly sounds familiar when referring to the Division story, but more on this later. The Kingbreaker is a new named assault rifle. As per all named items, it provides the perfect or fully optimized version of a talent available on other items. In this case, it's Flatline, where the perfect version offers 20% amplified weapon damage to pulsed enemies, and after 2 kills, pulse is applied to the next enemy that is hit. The quote on Kingbreaker is, "The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress." While I don't see any obvious relation to the talent, this quote comes from an individual named Frederick Douglass. Douglass was born in 1817 and after escaping from slavery, he would become the leading African-American voice of the 19th century. Although Douglas has been called the father of the civil rights movement, he also assisted in shaping the American nation as a women's rights activist, public speaker, author, journalist, publisher, and social reformer. Committed to freedom, Douglas dedicated his life to achieving justice for all Americans, in particular African Americans, women, and minority groups. He envisioned America as an inclusive nation, strengthened by diversity and free of discrimination. Douglas also served as an advisor to presidents, where Abraham Lincoln would refer to him as the most meritorious man of the 19th century. Analyzing the quote on the Kingslayer, this could be considered a direct call to action, and while at the time this was considered as a reference to slavery, there are many other issues Douglas applied the same statement to. This is a warning not to accept, make due, and suffer tyranny lightly, that by doing so, we put our own freedom at risk of being harmed or destroyed. Dare is a new named LMG. This is pretty much the LMG version of the Kingslayer, coming with the perfect flatline talent. Along with a number of other items, this is showing that the developers are looking to prop up the pulse skills going forward. These have perhaps been underutilized across builds up until now. But this isn't the only similarity across the two weapons. On the quote, this weapon reads, "If you dare to struggle, you dare to win. If you dare not to struggle, then damn it, you don't deserve to win." This follows the similar meaning behind the Kingslayer quote, where the message is that you should fight for what you believe in. Much like the other two, this quote comes from American activist Fred Hampton. Born in 1948, he would eventually become the deputy chairman of the National Black Panther Party and chair of the Illinois chapter. Hampton founded the anti-racist, anti-class Rainbow Coalition, a prominent multicultural political organization that initially included the Black Panthers, Young Patriots, poor whites, and the Young Lords, Hispanics, and an alliance among major Chicago street gangs to help end infighting and work for social change. Hampton considered fascism the greatest threat, saying, "Nothing is more important than stopping fascism, because fascism will stop us all." He would eventually be killed in 1969 by Chicago police in a raid that saw more than 90 bullets fired into the apartment containing Hampton, his pregnant fiancée, and several other Black Panthers who were sleeping. Upon finding that Hampton was still alive, he was executed by an officer at close range, who fired 2 bullets into his head. While at this point it probably sounds like I'm attempting to initiate some sort of revolution, I assure you that this is not the case. I'm waiting until I have a much larger following before going down that path. But the origin of these quotes all talk to similar aspects: fascist, totalitarian and class-based rule, of which we have seen many examples throughout history, like Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler. And while Ubisoft has publicly stated in the past that their games aren't political, it can understandably be a challenge to create any sort of more grounded, semi-realistic good versus evil storyline, without intentionally or unintentionally having some sort of association to events and regimes that have happened in the past or present. Plus, it doesn't help that people like myself take enjoyment out of making these sorts of games even more immersive by attempting to close the gap between fiction and reality. The Division story has certainly been leading us down a path of fascist, totalitarian and class-based rule, with the unknown employers behind Natalia and the Black Tusk attempting to gain control over the United States of America. But this is where I raise the question to you. Are these references simply just a nod in the direction of prominent figures in the American civil rights movement? Or are these put in place to speak of the similar, and I use that word very loosely, situation that is playing out in the Division story? Let me know what you think in the comments. These are the type of topics that I love coming across in games. Any excuse to research real-world history and attempt to find ties within the story. But as always, I could be completely overanalyzing something that has merely been put into the game as just a powerful, thought-provoking quote to add some filler in an area where perhaps no depth was ever intended to be placed. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers!